So we will go live now. Hi, everyone. Good morning, good evening, good afternoon. So can you hear us all? If I'm audible, please drop a comment so that I know that I'm audible to you all. Okay, great. So hi everyone, good morning, good evening, good afternoon, and welcome to this MBA-lytical session. I am Dipinti, an incoming MBA candidate at Dartmouth Tuck and an e-GMAT alumnus. And joined with me today in our session, in our one-to-one session, is Advait, who's currently employed as a program manager in Facebook at Singapore. And he is also a GMAT 760 scorer who has secured an admit into INSEAD Business School. So welcome to the session, Advait, and I hope that we have a great session going forward.
Thanks, Dipinti. Looking forward to the session.
Right. So before we start, I'll just give a quick, brief structure on how the session is going to progress, so that it's clear for everyone here. So we'll talk about Advait's profile a little bit. We'll ask him to just give a brief description of his background, his resume, and his work experience. Post then, we will move on to his GMAT journey, and we'll briefly touch upon the fact that how crucial was achieving the score 760 important for his applications in, say, several B schools. Next, we will move on to his short-term and long-term goals and try to figure out how he sort of crafted those goals from his background and from his experience. And then, how did he use these goals to sort of shortlist the B schools that he applied to? Post then, we will move over to a more focused kind of discussion on INSEAD. We'll take up INSEAD's essay questions because INSEAD has an extensive application process. So we'll take up each and every question and we'll try to dissect them, and we'll also try to find out how Advait approached that particular question. So I hope you get a lot of insights from the session. At the end, we will tackle all the audience Q&A, but you can start posting your comments from now, and Advait and I will take them at the end. So does that sound good, Advait?
Perfect. Yep. Sounds good.
Okay, great. So let's get started then. Why don't you just start by telling us a little bit about yourself and walking us through your work experience?
Sure. So my journey started off as a data scientist back in Bangalore. It was a company called Mu Sigma. It's a well-known analytics company back in India. I worked there for about 5 years, and I graduated through the ranks. I started off as a data scientist, moved up the ranks, to becoming a team lead and then an analytics manager. And post that, I moved to Singapore through Mu Sigma as an analytics associate, working as an analytics translator for a client based in Singapore. After about 5 years, I wanted to move away from the services industry and wanted to move to a more of a product-based company to see the impact of the work that I do. And that's how the opportunity at Facebook came by. And I'm in the company. I'm in this team called Commerce Operations, wherein our aim is to prevent bad content to go live on the Facebook platforms. So that's me with respect to my career journey as of now. And my next goal is to basically pivot to product management from program management. So yeah, that's the why for my MBA, I would say.
Okay, that's awesome. That covered a lot of ground. And let's, dissect a little deeper into each and every aspect that you mentioned. So first of all, let's start with your GMAT score. It's a 760, so which I would say is the 99th percentile. And, it's a terrific score, I would say. So why don't you just briefly touch upon, say, how you approached going to a 760, what all hurdles you faced. And then primarily, do you think this score was really crucial in your application? When you apply to a bunch of schools, did this score really help you?
Yeah, so I think my journey has been quite a long one, I would say, when it comes to GMAT. It started way back in 2017, but I don't think I was serious back then with respect to my GMAT journeys. I'd given few attempts, which I genuinely don't think I put in effort. But during this pandemic, it really helped me to rethink on what should I be doing in the later stages of my career, and that's the reason why the MBA app dream like became live again. So initially when I started off, I mean, I was pretty clear about like which are the resources, because I had done enough research on that part, on that front, right? So I had already subscribed to e-GMAT and I was doing well. Uh, the concepts which I'd gone through, those had helped me a lot. So those attempts led to like scores of 700 and 680, which were kind of surprising for me because I was doing well in the mocks. But then I analyzed it and went to a score of 760. Basically, I had a moment of epiphany of sorts in terms of after my fourth attempt, which was a 680. I did reach out to Nava from e-GMAT, and he did give me some personalized feedback around what am I missing in on few aspects. For example, he clearly called out that RC is one weak area that I need to focus upon, which I kind of knew, but that just reinstated the fact that I need to give some more focus to RC as well as for quant. There was a clear signal which was coming that I'm basically pacing it wrong. I'm taking too much time at the start and rushing it towards the end. So those kind of insights helped me in my final attempt of and getting the coveted score, because I was kind of getting those scores in my mocks, but just that translating it finally made that change. I feel.
So personalized feedback was very useful for you in your GMAT journey, right?
Yeah,
If
I
I
would say.
can gather that. Hmm. Okay. And was the score really crucial for you for your application? Did you feel that in the process?
So for an Indian male engineer, I think good GMAT score is like a prerequisite of sorts. The other aspect which was really crucial for me was I don't think I had like stellar acads from my engineering days. So, and I know that one big aspect is academics for all the colleges. So if you do not
Hmm.
have like the stellar acads, you can compensate that by GMAT. So that's the reason why I was pretty clear that I need to get like a good GMAT score in order to stand off good chances. And I think, yeah, I mean, in terms of application, that score did count. I did get interview invites from multiple colleges, and I converted INSEAD. So I would say, in hindsight, definitely the score does matter.
Yeah, I completely agree. And I think when you mentioned about Indian male engineers, I was like, okay, tell me about it, because it's not just male engineer, it's female
Yeah.
engineer. And I think
Yeah. So
I'm the best example. Yeah, so I mean 760, yeah, it's very crucial for us, especially if you don't have any other point in the application or any other acad that really stands out there in the GMAT score comes in really handy. Yeah. Great. So I think so once your GMAT journey, it kind of ended, and then you say moved over to shortlisting your schools, or you sort of. I think at the next point we just start figuring out stuff in our mind that how we are going to craft our journey, and wherein our goals stand in this particular point. So at this point, I would like to know that why did you want to? So you said that you wanted to pivot to product management. So what inspired you to do that? First of all, and secondly, did your schools, the schools that you shortlisted, were they also a factor of your short and long term goals?
Got it. I think I'll tackle the first question in terms of what triggered the reason to do an MBA and stuff, and what were my short-term and long-term goals. I think having worked, so I started off as a data scientist and I had worked in the services industry and now pivoted into like a product-based company. So even though I am in a product-based company, I am in the operations team. So I'm not like I work with product managers, I work with the product team, and I'm exposed to how product team functions, but I'm not really like in that team to make those strategic decisions, right? So that was an immediate trigger in terms of that's something which I want to pursue. And also from a long term perspective, I think I would want to explore my entrepreneurship capabilities in the long run. I mean, I do not have any ideas to bounce off right now, but I think that's something which would happen at some point of time, given that it runs in the family. My dad kind of started his own business, so that's something which I wanted to explore. And I think in order to get there, I think being a product manager kind of gives you those skill sets, because you are kind of owning a product, and taking, and like, although you are like discussing with a lot of stakeholders, but at least it gives you a good sense of how like a product strategy should be, right? That's the reason why venturing into product management was a short term aspect,
Hmm.
which I had. So that those are my short term and long term goals. Now, how did I go about creating, selecting schools accordingly? The first aspect was location, right? You need to think about what location do you want to be in. And I was pretty agnostic, to be fair. Like, I was okay with being in Europe as well as US. And that's the reason why I chose both schools, both like schools from both locations. I had a good mix of, like, I had more or less, I had like more on the US side. But even from Europe, I knew that INSEAD is the school which will give me that platform. It is the best school in Europe for sure, and it will give me those that platform to explore my like entrepreneurship as well as the product management aspect. And
So,
even
just sorry to cut you short, but just one question. I think because all of us, when we target geographies, the one thing that we really have in mind is because European schools, say INSEAD or LBS or Cambridge, so they have this accelerated MBA. We can say that it's kind of expedited. It's for 1 year, and in the US, it's for 2 years, right? So it's a complete like a long-term MBA course. You have a lot of internships in there. So were those factors like? Did you consider those factors, or you were, you didn't mind? Not doing an internship also.
So those two factors, I did consider those factors.
Hmm.
So there are pros and cons of both of it, right? One is, yes, internship does help a lot,
Hmm.
but I was kind of confident given my profile, and because I do not have any industry bias of sorts. So with my profile, I could land a job within a year is a confidence that I kind of had. I know, but yes, like all those factors
Hmm.
aside, European MBAs are basically the fast track MBA, so
Yes.
that will be very fast paced program, and I'm aware of it, and I would want to challenge myself on that aspect. On the other hand, I was also like kind of okay with US schools, which
Hmm.
basically gives you more time to explore, and
Right.
especially I would say from an advice perspective, if you are someone who's not sure of where you want to be from a career standpoint, if you want to be that explorer, if you're of that explorer mindset, I would say like a 2 year MBA would give you that good opportunity. Versus if you are someone who's absolutely clear, okay, this is where I want to be in the next few years, and I want to like chart my career trajectory in this way. I think even a fast track MBA does work. So that's how I saw it. Because I was
Hmm.
quite clear of what I wanted, I did not mind really exploring US as well as Europe.
Yeah, that helps. I mean, just go on. I mean, you were saying about shortlisting the schools and the schools that you applied to. Yeah.
Yeah, so in on those aspects, because like those were my goals, and accordingly I went about selecting schools on those lines. Initially, when while researching, right, we have, and it's no one's fault. I think that's how we have, everyone is trained to basically look at colleges from a ranking perspective. But I don't think like as I started researching, I just got better informed that that's not like the best strategy to go about. Every college has its own USP. For example, Tuck, it's really well known for consulting, and I spoke to multiple folks from Tuck as well. When it comes to product management and stuff, like location might become an hindrance. I'm saying might. Obviously, you can you can do well. So Tuck has that aspect. Booth and Wharton, those are finance heavy schools. So if you're really interested in like finance aspect, I would say Booth, Columbia, Wharton. Those are the schools that you would want to target. For my goals, being in tech and being wanting to be in tech and wanting to pursue product management, schools such as like the Stanfords and the MIT Sloans and even Kellogg for that matter, those schools stood out as lucrative for me. And there are a few schools which I wanted to apply, which I could have, but I just did not have time. I would say Haas is a school, UCLA is a school, because those are on the West Coast, and those give you the platform to network well with the tech industry. So those are the schools I would say. Those might not be like, for example, UCLA, right? That's not like top 10 school, but if you
Yes.
want to be on the product management side, and if you want to be in tech, that's a school that you should be pursuing for sure. So that was my approach in taking and selecting schools. So I basically landed with MIT Sloan, Kellogg, Ross, Stanford. Yeah, these are the schools which
Hmm.
I applied to.
Right. And INSEAD from Europe,
Yeah,
right?
in Europe for sure.
Okay, okay, great. So I mean, that's a very diverse list, I would say, and it makes sense. I mean, the factors that you said which mattered for you. So now that you apply to, say, a lot of different kind of schools, because all of these schools they focus on very different things, right? So, for example, INSEAD focuses on a holistic application. Kellogg will try to find out your core values, your leadership. So, let's talk about, let's group US and let's group INSEAD differently. And were there application differences, like which you saw noticeable differences among these schools?
For sure.
Especially US and Europe. if we talk
First,
about that?
I think one major difference between US and European schools is US schools US schools still focus a lot on like other aspects too, but I think academics is still their core. Like they do like academics plays a lot of factor on US part as well, right? Versus if you look at European schools, right? I mean, this is my personal
Hmm.
opinion. Like holistic profile is truly valued in the European aspect of things, right? In European schools. So that's like the TLDR of things. But when it comes to application as well, right? Every school has its own like application, and you need to like tweak your application according to those schools. Even though the questions might sound similar, and you might have like your own personal stories to go about it, but you need to understand what that school is asking. For example, Kellogg has an essay related to brave leadership. So what does brave leadership actually mean? You need to understand what is Kellogg implying by brave leadership. Have you gone through the times wherein you have navigated through ambiguity and chalked out situations, and you've stood up to those situations? Stanford's motto is change lives, change organizations, change the
Right.
world. So you need to be a dreamer. You need to paint a vision in terms of Stanford. And there's just one question that they have: what matters most to you, and why Stanford? So you need to paint a vision there, and that you need to be really vulnerable there. Versus European schools, right? If you look at the application for INSEAD, it's a really extensive application. Like that's the most extensive INSEAD along with LBS, I would say, are the
Right.
most extensive application because they have like 4 work essays as well as 3 personalized essays, motivational essays. So you have enough scope to like to basically present multiple aspects of your profile in European schools. I'm not saying it's not there in US schools, but you cannot elaborate as much in those applications in US schools as compared to European schools, I would say.
Hmm. So I completely agree with that. So, in this case, if I talk about you, so would you say that working at, a company which is, say, culturally very diverse, like Facebook, and at an international location like Singapore, did that really help in leveraging all those aspects for all your applications in general?
I would say yes, it did. Primarily, I would say it really helped for INSEAD because INSEAD has a parameter which is international motivation.
Hmm.
So that is where you really need to go on and elaborate what exactly are your like how much of an exposure that you've had internationally. And it need not be the fact that you would like obviously being in Singapore and being working here internationally and traveling across countries did help, but they are not looking for those experiences. What they're looking for is how have you like how can you display that in your application. So like for me, more than the international travels and living and working in internationally, what helped was my interactions with people from with multiple cultures, right? So different cultures work very differently. Like Asian culture is very different than European culture, than US culture. And I was actually glad that I worked in a team which had like members from all these cultures. So I could see how those cultures played out differently. I could see how there were like slight conflicts which used to happen, and how at the end of the day everyone came together and worked for the larger objective. And those are the kind of anecdotal experiences which I put in the application as well. So that's an advice which I can give. It's not about just the fact that you do not have an international motivation or you do not have any international experience that work against you. Even the fact that if you work with clients which are international, which are basically placed internationally, you have to bring that aspect of the nature rather than the quantitative aspect of working abroad, I would say.
Yeah, I think this is a very common misconception that applicants often have that, international experience just means having stayed and worked internationally. Because for me, I have never traveled internationally except, say, for a few tourist destinations. But yes, I do work in a team that is entirely Swedish, and I was able to leverage that particular point for my application. And they were really happy about it that, I have learned so many things about the Swedish culture. And they asked me these questions that, okay, so what can you tell me the difference between the Swedish and the Indian culture? What have you learned from that? So
Yeah.
that's very important. Now, talking about you, Advait, I remember when we were speaking day before yesterday, you also told me that you're a travel enthusiast. I mean, besides Singapore, I think you have traveled to over 15 countries and different kind of geographies. Did you use that as well in your application essays or interviews?
So I use that point in my extracurricular activities
Okay.
for in the INSEAD section, because INSEAD has a section for extracurricular activities.
Hmm.
And more than the travel aspect, I put
Hmm.
like photography is one of my like hobbies, I would say, passions. So that's something which I put in, like during my travels, like the different landscape pictures which I clicked. So those are the things that I highlighted. And then
Hmm.
basically how did I tie that back to like community in terms of involved in like companies like photography group, and what do I plan to do at INSEAD, like
Hmm.
taking the photography passion and elaborating it. But yeah, I mean, in terms of travel enthusiasm, I don't think I explicitly called out, but I subtly put it in these applications, which made it
Hmm.
clear to the outcomes that okay, this guy has traveled for basically that's something which was there in my resume. So
Hmm.
it's those are something which outcomes did take a note of, I guess.
Right. So, I mean, you did something that a lot of us do. I mean, a lot of us boast of ourselves to be, travel enthusiasts. But the way in which you portrayed it in the application, that made a lot of sense, right?
Yeah, I would say because like travel, and if everyone is a travel enthusiast, in my
Mhm.
opinion, like for that matter, right? But so you just call it out directly, it might not fly, but the way you put it, that matters.
Yeah.
Like, what are your actual experiences, and how have you
Hmm.
enriched from those?
Right. Okay, so I think we have covered a ground on your, say, your short-term, long-term goals, and how did you shortlist your business schools, and how did you tackle applications and the differences also. So let's move over to INSEAD, and let's go over to INSEAD and INSEAD focused application. So tell me how long did it take? Because I have heard stories of people taking long days, months of preparing for INSEAD's application. There are so many recommendation essays. So how long did you take for that?
Okay, this is fun actually. So what really happened was, and this is like full disclaimer, I heavily misinterpreted the time that it would take in my applications, and that led to me not applying to few schools which I could have. That's the TLDR. But how long did it take? So initially I was planning to apply to INSEAD much earlier, even in fact in round one, but because of the GMAT hiccups, I could not do that. uh, so I was actually done with my GMAT around October, but we had already started preparing. So I was already working with the consultant. So it took me, I would say, good 2 months, easily good 2.5 months to like work on my essays, go back and like go back in your timeline, go back in your life journey, go recap and think about what are the stories which come across, because it's not just about INSEAD. I think any school, any good school, the essays that you would see, those are really interesting essays. And I think it's a very soul searching. It was a very soul searching journey for me, because what matters most to you, or like what are your strengths, what are your weaknesses, what's your proudest achievement, what is your biggest failure. You need to think a lot. You need to think harder in terms of what, like getting those stories in first place, then crafting those stories to make a very coherent application which is consistent across all your profile. That is an effort, I would say, and that took me good 2.5 months. I had to talk, like I had to think on my own for a very long time, talk to my close friends, talk to people I know of, and bounce off ideas. What do they think about it? So that it was an interesting journey, I would say. So and I feel I learned a lot through it. But yeah, from a time perspective, it took me good 2.5 months, especially for INSEAD.
Makes sense. I mean, and I think that's a great insight to pick up from actually. So like you said, it's a very soul searching process, and you need to retrospect and introspect the sort of anecdotes in your professional journey. Yeah. So okay, now that you have started, say you have started your application, and then you have reached to a point where you see the essays, right? So let's talk about the essays one by one. So I know that INSEAD has about two section of essays. One section talks about your job and your work experience, right? Your current profile. There are very interesting questions there, So let's take up, say, one by one question. So there's, first of all, I think the question that they have is that if you don't go for an MBA, where do you see yourself, right? If you don't get into NCR, if you don't get into any of these school, then where is it that you see yourself in staying in the current job in the next few years? How did you tackle that?
I think it's a very tricky question, and I had to like go back and forth on this. What the way I did it was, look, if I do not have an MBA, it's not the end of the world for me, because you can't be portraying that I'm desperate for an MBA, because you would want to show that without an MBA as well, that you can be a successful person. That is something which INSEAD like B-School is looking through that question. But at the same time, MBA will give you that impetus in terms of where do you want to be, right? And that's the reason why you are pursuing an MBA. So for example, the story which I wrote was, if I were not to graduate or have an MBA degree, I would probably transition in my job itself and become a people manager and try to navigate things accordingly. I would be a team lead, become a people manager, and take up additional responsibilities, and I could still be successful. It's a people management track that I would be taking. But through an MBA, I would want to pivot, and that pivoting is, and that an MBA is needed for and is necessary for me in order to pivot to a product management aspect. So that's how the school is probably comfortable that, okay, even if if this guy does not have an MBA, it's not like he's going to fail in life. He can still do well, but just the fact that he wants to pivot his career journey, and MBA would really be crucial for him. That's the kind of answer which I gave.
Okay, okay. But do you think that this question is also like, candidates can often get confused in this particular question on how to tackle it? And, did you gather any insights on how to tackle this question very subtly, so it doesn't come across as the fact that, that you don't need an MBA at all. You have it all, right?
Yeah, I think that's something which was I
Hmm.
was very wary of, because having worked in a like a relatively decent
Hmm.
brand, I would say, and working internationally, I think it could have been very easy for me to just say that, okay, if even if I don't get an MBA, everything is fine.
Yeah.
But it's important to portray that fact that, look, an MBA is still important. But I would say for that question, right, Dipinti, like there are multiple aspects with through other questions that you can portray why an MBA is necessary. So I said that this is what it will be. So the adcoms would through my answers, they could clearly see that, okay, this guy can fairly do well in this
Hmm.
part itself, but an MBA would help him give that necessary
Right.
upside, I would say.
Hmm.
The mistake that people would do is two aspects: is just be arrogant and saying, like, I do not need an MBA and I'll
Hmm.
still be fine. And the other aspect is the other way part, right?
Yeah.
I like just be desperate, like I'll be a huge failure without an MBA.
Hmm.
So I would say just you need to balance both sides to this.
Hmm. Yeah, the extreme ends are dangerous. I've been saying that, without an MBA, I would just, my life would be nothing and I would be nothing. And the other thing, I don't need an MBA, I have it all. So,
Yeah.
yeah, okay, that's really nice. And I think that is something that applicants should also bear in mind while they are tackling this particular question, because there's a huge possibility that it can be misinterpreted by the adcom.
Yeah.
Right. So, the other aspect in this particular section, the job section, is crafting your journey properly, right? I mean, where your career choices, I think that is what INSEAD also focus on. That where you started and why. So, for example, you started your career with Mu Sigma and then you switched over to Facebook. So, this transition, it just cannot be that you just did it for the sake of doing it, or you say for financial gains, or just any ulterior motive. You'll have to show that there is a rationale behind your career choices, right?
Yeah.
So how did you tackle this particular, crafting this particular journey, or the work journey especially?
Yeah, I think this is a really important question for INSEAD perspective, and they have given enough word count for you to elaborate their journey as well in that question.
Hmm.
So the way I did was, like, I had a very interesting journey at my time in Music as well, because I donned multiple hats. Being a data scientist, like initially I was actually working as a pre-sales consultant within Music. From there, I switched to data scientist. From there, I transitioned into a team lead, to an analytics manager, to an associate. So at every stage there was a why which was important. For example,
Right.
why did I switch from a sales perspective background to an analytics background? Because that's something which I portrayed. Like I'd given a backdrop of, even in my college days, I was like really into like data related activities, and those things excited me. That gave a good logical journey in terms of why Mu Sigma in first place. Because it was analytics back then in 2013 when I started, was a very nascent industry. So what was your choice for joining that company? post that, why did you move to Singapore? So your international motivation, the the want or the need to interact with multiple cultures that led to me taking this international opportunity, and then why the move to like a company such as Facebook. So I said that I wanted to move away from a services industry to wherein you play an more of an advisory role and you do not see the impact of the things that you kind of consult or suggest. That's the whole, that's how the whole consulting industry works, right?
Right.
Versus when you switch to a product based company, you live through that impact, you see that impact through. And I just wanted to do that. I wanted to see the impact of what I'm actually working upon. That's the reason why I pivoted there. And then like just leave that question to a part that, okay, this is what my journey has been. And that can be a very logical next step to it as to what should be the next career goal, which is the next question that INSEAD has, the short term and long term goals.
Right, right. So it's, so from what I gather, it's very important to have every single piece of the puzzle in place. And there should be a rationale behind everything that you have done and everything that you're going to do. So it should all be connected. And MBA should say that, if you have some skill gaps, or if you are not aware of a particular say segment of your education, then MBA can fill that up.
Yeah.
Uh, but it shouldn't be like jumping from here to there just without having any rationale behind that.
Yeah, I mean that, because
Hmm.
if you're just jumping around without any
Mhm.
story, that just means that it's just painting a picture that this guy is a confused
Yeah.
person, does not know what he wants particularly in life, and that's like a
Hmm.
red flag for INSEAD.
Hmm.
So even if he gets an MBA, he might not be able to land where he wants to be because
Hmm.
he's just not sure what he wants to do in life.
Hmm. Right, exactly. So, yeah, I think the jobs section we covered it pretty well, and let's move over to the next section. That is, I think, self-awareness section, and this is also a section that often people falter at because, as we say, we are not cognizant of our own strengths or own weaknesses and all of that, right? So let's move over to the self-awareness essays, and the essays basically talk about your success, your failure, your strengths, your weaknesses. So let us talk about the negative aspects first, like your failure and your weaknesses, right? So how did you tackle each of these sections, and how did you portray them in your application?
This was particularly hard, I would say, because I had to think really hard, go back and take those stories, search for those stories in first
Mm,
place. Uh, so for failure, that's like searching for stories.
mm,
Weakness is identifying those weaknesses. I mean, I know what my weaknesses are, but I just
mm,
cannot be portraying those weaknesses in for a B school essay. That just does not will not fly, right? So how do you craft those? Being honest and vulnerable at the same time, being cognizant that it's a B school application essay and not something which you are going to rant about in front of friends, right? So that's those are the things which I had to take note of. So I had a talk with like and for in order to identify those aspects, right? Those are the exact like instances when I spoke to my close ones, my friends, my family, in terms of, okay, what do you think are the weaknesses that I should that I have, and then they helped me a lot in terms of identifying those and identifying as well as reinstating that this is something which I can portray. And then I went back, okay, this is probably, yeah, this is definitely one of the weaknesses. How do I go back and bring about the right set of examples of right set of stories so that those will be applicable to a B school journey? For example, one of the weaknesses
mm,
which I wrote in the essays was like being difficult to let go of things.
mm,
uh, I take pride in what I do, but at the same time, like if something happens, I'm like I really find difficulty in letting go of things. So how has that affected me, and what is, and it's
mm,
from a failure perspective, from a weakness perspective, right? You can't just leave it there. Like you also have to portray what are you doing to improve upon that weakness, and probably how can INSEAD also help you, how can basically a
mm,
BC also help you in overcoming that weakness. So I quoted those examples as well, wherein instead of being a very fast-paced program, I will
mm,
need to prioritize a lot of things, and I'll be forced to let go of things, because if I do not do that, that's just not going to help me in the upcoming projects or upcoming courses that I have, right? So that's something which I wrote from a weakness perspective. Failure wise, again, everyone has faced failure at some point of time.
Mm.
The biggest aspect that you want to probably spin off, and I think that particular question was like strengths and like achievements and failures are
Mm.
that was one question which was
Right.
clubbed together in the
Mm.
application. I personally was particularly happy with that question was because I portrayed it in a manner wherein I put the failure story first. What was my failure? How did it happen? Why did it happen? What were the learnings to that failure? And how did I apply those learnings in the proudest achievement of mine? So
Okay.
that gave a very coherent and logical story that okay, I applied my learnings to my failures and applied it in my like proudest achievement story. So
Mm.
that gave a very good flavor to the outcomes that okay, this guy can work upon his mistakes and apply it elsewhere as well.
Mm. That's interesting. I mean, even I have narrated success and failure stories, but then that's interesting. I mean, drawing from a failure and then sharing how it eventually turned into your proudest achievement. That
Yeah.
I would say it's awesome. And so yeah, I mean, it's great that how you crafted the essays, and I think the self awareness section, as you mentioned, it's very important to know yourself and talk to friends and talk to other people about it, so that you get to know about that, right? Because it's an open ended question from what I have seen. So I mean, did it happen that were you say that it was an open ended question? So were you say confused at the start about how to go on about it, and how did you structure that particular piece?
The clear answer is yes. At the start, when you
Hmm.
go,
Right.
because I mean, once you start writing, going through this essay journeys, yet that you'll obviously realize that the V1 or the version one that you create is so different from the final version, and you are absolutely confused about how to go about it. But the
Yeah.
aspect is to just get started, right? So the biggest learning for me for there was being vulnerable and trying to like just try to portray your real stories
Hmm.
and then basically making it slightly applicable to B school because I remember like I did work with a consultant by the way, so I remember
Hmm.
I like had narrated a very like long story about stuff and like then the consultant was like yeah this is a good story Advait, but remember this is a B school application, so we had to then basically tailor it according to the B school and cut it short and basically uh, ensure that it is a B school ready essay.
Hmm. Right. Great. I think, so we have covered the self-awareness essays, and then, previously we had touched base upon this, that how you used your extracurricular experience, like your photography and your travel experiences in the extracurricular essay. And now, apart from this, let's talk about your community experience, because I think that is also a very significant part of the holistic profile that INSEAD looks at. So, you told me that you had worked for, you had some community experience in college, and then while you were with Mu Sigma in Bangalore, you also had community experience there. But in Singapore, you did not, right? So there was clearly a gap between the community experience that you exhibited, and then you had a gap. But how did you leverage that? And say, in the if, say in the application essays or in the interview, how did you sort of explain the community experience? Number one, and number two, were there questions about this particular gap that you had?
So I'll be very transparent, right? I did
Hmm.
have concerns around if that could
Yeah.
be would be counted against me. But what really happened was I had really good stories from a community experience perspective, at least from my college days, even from my like Bangalore days, right? I had decent stories to write about, and I genuinely thought that those stories would be e- enough to cover like the gap that I had because it's
Hmm.
it's been years and it's not like I am sort of affiliated to those organizations even now.
Okay. Okay.
It's just that I'm not as active as I was before.
Okay.
So that's the only drawback I would say.
Hmm.
But the kind of way I wrote it, like the stories which I had, I was pretty confident that those would count and that would give adcoms enough to say that yes, this guy was actively involved in communities.
Hmm. Right. So did you just say that, if one thing is like mentioning the community experience, and the other thing is telling how you drew from them, or say, if you had leadership qualities that you sort of inculcated in your community experience. So did you also do that?
Yeah, so I think that's the biggest aspect of community
Hmm.
experience, that the learning that you get through it is
Right.
so enlightening and that it's so I mean, it's so eye-opening, I would say. So those are the few things which I definitely wrote about. For example, like during my college days, we like I was a part of, and like I was in the committee section of NSS.
Hmm.
So like we did conduct organizational camps to villages, spending like a week there, involved in community activities. I did take up like I did teach basic math lessons to the kids there. So those kind of experiences, what did you learn from those experiences, and how do you plan to like leverage that and do that in future as well? Those are the kind of things which I talked about in my essays too.
Hmm. Right, it makes sense. So I think we have covered the essays, we covered the self-awareness essays, and the extracurricular and community experience. From what I could see, I mean, you were right that INSEAD really looks at the holistic profile, and every aspect of your application matters a lot. From what I could gather, and how you crafted your particular journey. Let's talk about the interviews. If you can give us some insights into the INSEAD interview. So how different was it from your US interviews? Were
Yeah.
there, say, behavioral questions, or were there, usual MBA questions that you get in your B school application?
Yeah, this is an interesting question as well.
Mm,
Because I did notice a lot of differences. I wouldn't say US versus Europe. I think it was school specific piece.
mm,
Uh, Particularly with respect to INSEAD, I think and this is something which I've got a feedback from everyone. The interviews at INSEAD are very very conversational. Uh,
right.
in fact, like few of my friends did have interviews over drinks, I would say. So those are the kind of conversations which happen at INSEAD. People are very relaxed, and they like the interviewers make you feel relaxed, and because they would want to like genuinely hang out with you and genuinely
Mm,
understand you as a person. Uh, One big aspect was because I was in Singapore, and Singapore is kind of relatively stable with respect to COVID situation. So in-person meetups were allowed. So both my interviews at INSEAD were in-person meetups, and that plays a huge role, I would
mm,
say. Like just the personal touch matters,
okay.
I would say. So, and it was a very relaxing interview. The second one more so than the first one. The first, like they were, the way it works for INSEAD was
Mm,
they try to match one of the. There are two interviews for INSEAD. So one of the interviewer is basically from your particular industry itself, and is a recent alum, versus
mm,
one alum, like one interviewer is a senior alum, which might not be from this particular industry, but
mm,
might be from someone from the field that you want to pursue. So someone like basically I wanted to pivot to product management, so he was a product manager of sorts,
mm,
and my first interview was the same industry which I was in. So they try to
right.
match that aspect, and they genuinely try to understand what are you looking for, how are you as a person. And one most important aspect that the interviews try to gauge is, will this does this person know enough about INSEAD, because it's going to be a fast paced program, it's going to be a 1 year program. Does he know what is he getting into, how is he going to leverage his time at INSEAD, and does he have enough to do that and basically land a job or not? That's something which they want to gauge, and also look at you as a person, look at your leadership capabilities and stuff.
Mm,
That was with respect to INSEAD. With respect to other schools, for example, Kellogg was a, I mean, I was kind of surprised with the kind of interview, because I had heard Kellogg also has a very conversational style, but I think
mm,
it all depends on the interviewers as well. My interview was great. That was
mm,
not a question about it. It's just the fact that I was just bombarded questions after questions for that piece. So I was like, okay, the behavioral questions just did not end. So that was with Mr. Kellogg. But like Ross was very conversational again.
mm.
So it depends on the interviews, I feel.
Yeah, yeah, that's perfectly right. So yeah, I mean, thank you for sharing all of these insights. I think it was very insightful, and it'll be really helpful for people who are targeting not only INSEAD, but then you spoke about US business schools also, like Kellogg, Stanford. Be really useful for them. I mean, that's all I would say from our side. And right now we'll take up audience questions. So we'll start taking up questions right away. And so let's take up. I see a couple of questions about the same topic. So I'll just post one question, and then maybe Advait can also touch upon others. So the question is, how important is a consultant's role in an MBA application? And then I see questions also pertaining to the fact that, Advait, whether you had selected a particular consultant, and would you like to talk about their role in crafting your applications?
Okay. I would to answer this question straightforward, right? It depends, and at what stage of the journey in the MBA application are you in? So when I was applying, I was actually initially targeting round one, and in order to target rounds, I started my journey very late, so I just did not have enough time to explore things, right? And I wanted direction. How do I proceed? So for that matter, I felt like hiring an MBA consultant would be beneficial, and it did help me a lot. And so the way I would say it is, if you have enough time to explore, if you have enough confidence in yourself about writing your own stories, uh, and if you have enough guidance from your peers to vet your essays, to give you that proper feedback, I genuinely don't think you would probably want an MBA consultant, right? But at the same time, like, if you feel that, if you're not confident, then you probably would want to go ahead and like seek an MBA consultant. And like selecting an MBA consultant, how do we go about it is also important. uh, I genuinely don't think I did enough holistic research, but I went about, I did like preliminary research on the GMAT club forums, and I did go with Aringo as the consultants, and as the consultant, I like all positive feedback about the company and about the consultant which I worked with. It was really an amazing experience. Expensive for sure, but no real negative. I don't have any negative feedback. It's all positive from an MBA of consultant, and they genuinely helped in all my applications, I would say.
Right. So amazing. I mean, the consultant really helped you, and I think you sort of put it together. Like, it depends on the applicant actually, whether the consultant is going to be useful for you or not. So
Yeah.
I see a lot of questions on profile evaluation, but then I would suggest that even if Advait has gotten into INSEAD, and even if you ask me about Dartmouth Tuck, we won't be able to evaluate your profile here. It doesn't depend on a couple of factors, and it's not that quantitative that you mentioned this and we'll be able to evaluate. Depends on a lot of factors, so like including your GMAT journey, your undergrad, your work experience. Everyone should be aware of all of those, and then profile evaluation, again, it's very subjective, right, Advait?
Yeah, it is like everyone has a personal like journey. Like,
Hmm.
it's not about what do you have in the profile that matters, but how do you portray that profile and how do you craft that profile in order to create a successful application.
Hmm.
That's what counts, right? For example, if I talk about my extracurriculars, I do not have like the stellar extracurricular. I'm not like a national level fencing champion, or I'm not like a ballet dancer who's represented in like Dance India dance of sorts, right? But the limited extracurriculars that I have, for example, I am a sports enthusiast. I love playing football. I love playing cricket. I've represented like my company in the intercorporate events. How do I get enriched from those activities?
Hmm.
What do I learn from those in day to day life, like teamwork and those aspects? Those are the things which I highlighted in the application, I would say.
Yeah, perfect. I think it's not what you have, as you mentioned, it is how you portray that, right? So yeah, that's very important. So I see a question, but I am not sure. So does certifications like PMP and CSM add value in essay for INSEAD? I mean, Advait, did you do any certification? And if yes, if I would be really glad if you could share that in which segment of the application could an applicant put this particular certifications that he or she has done.
So yeah, I did not do any certification of sorts. I would say they do add value, but
Hmm.
this I won't say I would not put these certifications under the essay sections. I would probably put it in CV, so that the adcoms are aware that, okay, if he wants to go like to pivot to or to go into product program management, what
Hmm.
is his caliber? What like does he have enough caliber to like go into program management in first
Hmm.
place? This is where I
Right.
think MP and CSM, they add value. And putting them on CV matters because those are certifications. Like, essays are like more or less you elaborate on your personal experiences and stuff. I'm not sure how would putting them in essays
Hmm.
uh, like give that value add to you. But in CV, on CV for sure, because adcoms do look at your CV. So that's important, I would say.
Right. Right. Yeah. Makes complete sense. I think in the CV it makes complete sense. So I think I see a question, but then I think we have already touched base on that. Rohit has a question that why did you choose INSEAD? Okay, so what all colleges he applied? I think he applied in Europe. He only applied to INSEAD, right?
Yeah.
Why did you choose INSEAD? I think he spoke a little bit about his short and long term goals. Were there any other factors that really appealed you to INSEAD? Say the culture or the people over there, the network.
Yeah, I can talk about that, right? Uh, so I've already talked about US versus Europe, so I would not venture there. Let's talk to within European colleges. Why did I choose just INSEAD?
Hmm.
I did my own research on like which other colleges which will give me that impetus to land a good role, and I was focused on a college which has a good international reputation, which has a good alumni network, because few years down the line my plans are to come back to India and do something on my own here. So for that reason, I think alumni network was something which mattered to me. And INSEAD is one of the colleges which has like a very well-known alumni network, which is like based in India as well. That was one aspect. Second aspect is it's a one-year program, so the opportunity cost, you save up on the opportunity cost as well. So you do your MBA and you're out of your like out with an MBA degree within 1 year. uh, Third aspect is on the work experience part. The kind of people that you see, those are on the higher side of work ex in European colleges versus US colleges. And I'm like having like 7 years of work ex as of now, 7.5 years of work ex. I would want to engage with people who have similar kind of work ex. So that appealed to me. And the fourth and the most important aspect is, if you're really looking at diversity, I think there is a clear answer. INSEAD, like I mean, it is an international school. It's the school prides itself on saying that where every nationality is a minority. So and even my like networking sessions as of now, I've seen like people who are very culturally diverse. I've seen like a Chinese woman who's a teacher in US, a British person working in Japan, a person from like Middle East working in Abu Dhabi. So the like who was a part of like the Beirut blast when it happened. He was present there in Beirut. So like those are kind of experiences which I mean I saw those kind of people. And like if you really want diversity, if you really want to experience diversity, I do not think you will find it anywhere than in Sierra. Like 90 nationalities in one college, enough said, I guess.
Yeah, I mean that's wonderful actually, and I think diversity is one of the prime factors that people choose in INSEAD, and it makes perfect sense also. Right, thank you so much, Advait, for answering. Let's move over to the next question quickly. Adit has a question that did you consider the Singapore campus of INSEAD?
So it's a good answer for me. I think I have lived and worked in Singapore for 3.5 years, and I wanted to experience a different geography. So for very personal reasons, I chose France as a campus, and I would want to explore Europe for the next few years. Having said that, like if someone like Asia is really booming, there are really good opportunities in Asia. So and that's the reason why I think I'd mentioned at the start, the first thing that you would want to look when you are doing an MBA is the location aspect. Where do you see yourself to be after graduating from an MBA? If Asia is your answer, then I would say probably Singapore campus works better. Also, one thing to consider is INSEAD also offers like the exchange options. So you
Hmm.
can always start in France and end in Singapore, and or you can start in Singapore or end in France, or you could continue to be throughout in one location, right? So there are so
Hmm.
many people, and from someone, and this is an advice I could give. If someone who's wanting to seek like placement in a particular region, it's important that you do your second half of your journey. If you're doing an exchange program, it's important for you to do like the second half of the journey in that location. For example, if you're looking for opportunities in Asia, you might want to start in France and end in Singapore so that you can explore there. And if you want to explore Europe, then start in Singapore and end in France. What I am planning to do is start in France and end in France as well. So that's my personal take.
Right. I mean, great answer again. So thank you for taking that up. I think a lot of people would have this confusion over campuses, and a lot of factors start kicking in when you consider the campuses. But thank you for clearing that out. Let's take I would say, one more question from Arbaz. So chances of scholarship in INSEAD.
So this is a good question, because this is
Hmm.
INSEAD is a college which is like the scholarships at INSEAD or probably European schools. They are different from US colleges. Uh, INSEAD does have merit-based scholarships as well, and at the same time, there is a certain section wherein you can apply for like the diversity-based scholarships. So there is a, like, you need to write essays to in order to apply for those scholarships. For example, there is a like diversity scholarship. There is a scholarship for entrepreneurship of sorts. So those are like basically scholarships which are funded by previous INSEAD alums. So you need to apply for those and you need to write essays for those. And at the same time, yeah, there is merit-based scholarship as well. So the chances, like, it all depends on what kind of profile do you have, right? It, like, if your profile is really good, you have decent chance of scoring, of getting a scholarship. But at the same time, this is an important call out. European schools are not that flexible in giving scholarships as compared to US schools. So that's a definite advantage for US schools. US schools, you can get like 50% scholarship. I think Dipinti, you also might have received
Yeah.
good scholarship.
Yes.
There is an option of full ride for US schools as well.
Yes.
That's something which you will not find typically at European schools. You would, like, even a 20 to 30% scholarship is a good scholarship for a European school. Having said that, like, the admission fees itself, is there's a huge difference between US and
Yes.
Europe. Those are the
Yeah.
two important differences, I would say.
Yeah, absolutely. I think you talked about that, right? USP schools, I have seen, especially Ross Darden. I was just seeing the results, and they have just given out full rides, a lot of full rides this year, right? Even Tuck, I'm not sure whether Tuck has given out full rides. I've just seen, I think, one, but
Mhm.
yeah, Tuck has given out like good amount of scholarships to people, including there are a lot of scholarships that USB schools give. There's this women's scholarship. There's another merit-based scholarship. So yeah. Right. So Rohit has, let's take up the last question. So, it's I think it's language related. So, are you going to work in France or Europe? And if yes, have you learned the language there, or are you planning to learn the language?
Yeah, so I think a few things which I researched is, for my goals. I think there are few countries which give me, and I think Rajat gave me a good
Hmm.
perspective in the last session as well. The countries that I would probably be looking out is, from a language barrier perspective. I think London is a good city. That's
Hmm.
something and that has good opportunities. Amsterdam has good opportunities, which wherein language is also not a barrier. Apart
Hmm.
from that, I think there are opportunities in Germany that I would want to pursue. So to answer that question directly, I'm not looking at France particularly, but being in NCR, that opens up opportunities across Europe. So you're not looking for opportunities within France itself. You're looking for opportunities across Europe. That's the answer. With respect to languages, I think German is something which I would want to pick up. I haven't started yet, but that's out of interest. If opportunity in Germany knocks by, I think that's something which I would want to learn in the long run. As of now, I'm sticking to English. So let's see how.
Yeah, that's a great answer. And I think, as you spoke about German, I remembered my off late, obsession with Spanish. So I took up this Spanish lessons. And I don't know. I mean, it has been, say, about 15 days and I have forgotten all the words. So it's really difficult. But I would say, yeah, I mean, if you're focused, then of course you can learn a language. And if it's important, then yes, you should learn a language for that.
Yeah.
Right. So thank you so much for answering the questions, Advait. We have reached the end of the session. It was a very insightful session. You shared a lot of points. You shared a lot of strategies, I would say, that is very useful for future applicants. So anything that you would like to tell at the end, or is there anything that you would like to mention from your end?
I think final few thoughts is for people who are starting their MBA journey is get that GMAT out of the way as soon as possible. That is really critical because that gives you enough time to work upon your profile, research on your colleges, and do not let GMAT become a hindrance in order to apply. Because that's something which I personally experienced. I could have applied to a lot more schools than I did at the end because my GMAT score, I took it very late, so I had very less time. So that is something which I would just advise: get the GMAT out of the way and give enough time to research on colleges and our application. So that's my final takeaway, I would say.
Awesome. And I completely second that, having gone through the process myself. It's an extensive process. You need time. So, yeah, as he said, just get the GMAT out of the way and then dedicate enough time to the applications. Once you're done, at this point, I think we are all just relaxing and we are waiting for our business schools.
Yeah.
So, yeah. Thank you so much, Advait. Thank you for sharing the insights, and thank you all for tuning in. So we do have an upcoming session by Nupur Gupta. That's next week. She's a Wharton alumnus, and she's also the founder of Crack the MBA. You can gain a lot of insights on how to craft a compelling MBA application, which I think will be really useful. You can also explore whether you want to choose a consultant or not. So do tune in and do subscribe to the channel, and keep watching and keep waiting for more updates. So thank you guys. Thank you so much for your time. Thank you, Advait, again for joining us today.
No worries. My pleasure. Thanks, guys.
Yeah.
Bye bye.
Bye.
Cheers.